Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 104 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where still round the corner there may wait a new road or a secret gate.
But not yet weary are our feet. Oh, who am I kidding? We're exhausted. But still, folks, I think we'll manage to make our way over to the common room in just a moment. But before that, I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, who regrets selling all his feather beds to the Sackville Bagginses, Alan Sisto.
I'm a memory foam guy anyway. Thank you, Sean. And by the way, have you got the bathwater hot yet? All right, folks. Today we continue with Frodo, Sam, and Pippin as they encounter dark danger in the very heart of the Shire.
Yeah, sniffing riders with invisible noses are pretty unsettling, as it turns out.
It's a good thing Gildor and his folks show up eventually.
I can't help thinking of, my rider has no nose. How does it smell? Terrible.
Oh,
but no, it is a good thing Gildor and his folks show up eventually. But before he does, we've got another friend tarrying here a while with us, I believe. And that can only mean one thing.
Folks, today we're bringing you another new installment of The North Wing.
Just like the North Wing at the Prancing Pony Inn, which had a room or two made special for hobbits, we've got some room especially for some of our listeners to give us a chance to get to know them.
That's right. Well, rooms at the North Wing are admittedly hard to come by, so only our patrons at the Elrond's Honorarium and Círdan's contribution tiers are eligible. Now, if you'd like to be one of the next patrons to join us, please be sure to check out patreon.com/prancingponypod.
Please be sure, indeed. There's a short waiting list for the North Wing right now, but we will get through all those names before we know it, and we're happy to do this segment more often if we have to.
Hey, if we got to do it every week, then so be it.
We would love to.
Well, for now, why don't we go ahead and welcome our guest to the North Wing tonight, Christopher Bartlett.
Hi, folks. That's a wonderful pleasure to be here.
We are glad to have you, certainly.
Pleasure to have you. And we're looking forward to chatting with you a little bit. Why don't we start with a little getting to know you question? Where are you from? What do you do? And what does your family think of your Tolkien geekdom? That sort of thing.
That's a good one.
I'm originally from Ann Arbor, Michigan, but right now I live in Skokie, Illinois, just north of Chicago. I am deep in the imposter syndrome of running a construction company. That I started running in January because, my life was apparently not adventurous enough. And my family is actually, if I may take a little bit and run with this question, my family is actually the source of my Tolkien geekdom addiction.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay.
That's great.
I was 10 years old. I just turned 10, and Christmas rolled around, and I opened this box. And it was 15 hour-and-a-half cassette tapes of my wonderful great-aunt Eleanor, who, on a whim, decided that I needed to be able to read this book, and she was unaware of my being able to do so in any form at that point. And so I got all the way from the long-expected party. We were abandoned at the end of the 15th tape, where they camped out the first night in Moria. So, of course, that was quite a place to be stuck. And over the course of the next 6 years, I would get tapes in the mail. There were 43 of them when all was said and done. 43 cassette tapes that this wonderful great-aunt of mine, along with various and sundry cousins who occasionally spelled her when she had a cold or that sort of thing, would read.
What a labor of love. That's amazing. That's amazing.
It was an amazing introduction. And to this day, I am one of the weird outlying people who does not actually think very much of Rob Inglis's reading. Not because he's not talented, but because my first exposure to a reading of this was done with such amazing love.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's their fault.
It was very personal. I mean,
That's great.
That's right.
That is great. I love that.
What an amazing story. I absolutely love that. I don't know if our listeners, they may not know that the reason that she had to make those for you was because you're visually impaired, right?
That's correct, yeah.
I had to say that because I felt like if they don't know that context, they don't understand why did she make an audiobook for you.
That is, of course, correct. The Braille did exist, but she didn't know that. And
right.
I was very careful not to cheat.
Of course. Yeah, when you've got that much work being put into something for you to listen to. That is such an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that.
It really
is. That's moving.
That is
really
one of
cool.
That might be that's one of my favorites for sure. That
That's
might
a
be my
highlight
favorite
for sure.
introduction story. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great.
Well, and now a question that we ask everybody who comes to the Pony. Well, actually, you've answered it already. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's works? But let me ask you the second part of that question. What was your experience like? I mean, we know the basics, that it was an audio experience and it was, a deeply personal experience. But tell us a little bit about what the experience was like absorbing Tolkien's works. And then most importantly, the question you haven't been able to touch on yet is, why do you keep coming back? What brings you back to Middle-earth all the time?
Well, so I discovered Tolkien, this long-form discovery that other people, if you got eaten by Tolkien, you probably read all 3 books very quickly. For me, it was a 6 or 7 year experience. And that was very formative. And even when I didn't have all the story, I did. I don't have those tapes anymore because I wore them out. I broke them. I played them till they stopped working. And then a cat peed on them, and that was just kind of it. But
oh goodness, yeah, now they're gone for sure. I mean, there's no recovery lab that can get those fixed.
No.
To answer your question, I was a fairly lonely teenager.
Sure.
And so to have these people, these just incredibly decent, brave, flawed, wonderful people take me on their adventure. And, I remember the first time I met Faramir. Oh my gosh, what a revelation.
Yes.
I will tell a little secret here. My aunt was a bit misty-eyed when she got to, "Well, I'm back," he said, and so was I.
Oh, how could
How
you
can
not
you
be?
not?
Yeah, how could you not?
Particularly after 6 or 7 years.
Right.
So that's the second. The second part of your question is I experienced it as a lifeline in some ways.
Yeah.
And as for why do I keep coming back? Because every reading rewards with something new. And listening to your podcast and hanging out in Corey Olson's weekly Exploring the Lord of the Rings, where we literally spend 2.5 hours and read 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
So why do I keep coming back? Because it keeps on giving.
Yes,
there's so much there to find, isn't there?
One of the participants in the Questions After Nightfall made a comparison between Tolkien and Scripture. And well, I hope no listener is offended by that, because there is a truth in that for me, and I think for many of us, that there's just such a depth in this monumental work and in all the what does Michael Drought call them, all the ruins.
Yeah,
all
the textual ruins.
The broken, the textural, that of course we're going to keep coming back.
Yeah. You can't help it in so many ways.
There's always something new every time you go back in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I almost feel like some of your answers transcend a question like this, but
they really do,
I want to go ahead
don't
and
they?
ask. I mean, do you have a favorite book in the Legendarium? And if so, why?
I guess if you take book to be Tolkien's original vision, I guess it has to be the trilogy. Just because it's more fully realized than anything else, and while I am absolutely in awe of Christopher Tolkien's work in assembling, and I wish we had more of things like the, Unfinished Tales, Journey of Tuor to the Gate of Gondolin, which I know you have pointed out in past podcasts. I mean, such luminous, glorious writing.
Some of the best.
Yeah.
Such a tragedy that it wasn't finished.
I know.
But so I guess for me, it comes back to the trilogy is a finished work.
Yeah.
And the rest are beautiful ruins. And I love the beautiful ruins, and I love getting into them. Y'all may not know this, but I discovered you guys last summer. So I binge listened to everything before the start of, well, I don't remember exactly where we were but it was midsummer last year.
Yeah, last summer we would have been fairly near. We would have probably been in the Akalabath or of the Rings of Power.
I remember exchanging some emails with you and kind of, as you were catching up. I do remember.
Yes, that's right.
Pretty amazing.
So I guess to answer your question, it's the trilogy as a whole.
Yeah, that's fair.
What about anything outside of the Legendarium? Anything that you've explored there?
I haven't actually done a lot. I mean, I read his Beowulf,
Okay.
not the critics, but his translation that
Right,
came out.
right.
I got the Christopher Lee reading.
For Children of Hurin, yeah.
Yeah, the Children of Hurin, which was, of course, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Because Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But I haven't journeyed far into the Smith of Wootton Major or Farmer Giles or these are things on my list.
Good, good. Well,
Yes.
that actually kind of answers the next question then, because I was going to ask if you had any Tolkien goals you wanted to share, but it sounds like maybe one of them might be to explore some of those non-legendary works.
Oh, I'm a completist. One of the things I would dearly love to be able to do and haven't been able to do is acquire copies accessible to me of the history of Middle-earth.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we've chatted about that before in emails. Yeah. Trying to find, it just doesn't exist, does it?
Yeah.
It doesn't. No, not yet.
No.
I've been following along with the Corey Olsen's glosses on them, which is certainly better than nothing. And it's amazing the things I've learned about just doing that. And I'm
Yes.
but to have the whole text would be amazing.
Yeah, to be able to read and to catch Christopher's notes as well as his father's texts and the explanations and the expounding upon, and that would be. I wish there was something that we could do. I wish that we had some pull with the publishers to get them to make an audiobook. Well, that would be a very terrible audiobook, but at least make some sort of
even an ebook or something.
I did send a letter to the Tolkien estate. Sadly, they have not yet responded.
Yeah, that's.
But I guess that would be my goal, the completeness of the legendary.
Absolutely. Well, Sean, time for lightning round?
We'll continue to hope. Yeah, I think we can go ahead to the lightning round.
I'm ready.
Have a little fun with this one. All right. We'll make this as lightning as we can here. Favorite dwarf?
Balin.
Balin's a good one. Favorite
Can't argue
scene,
with that one.
Favorite individual scene or moment in all of the Legendarium is open to you on this one.
Oh, I guess I have to split between two.
Okay.
All of the conversation at Henneth Anun and that moment on the steps of Cirith Ungol when Sam very nearly, but does not quite
That moment,
get it
yes.
with Gollum. That moment when Gollum is lost forever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where he woke up and he saw him pawing at his master.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that.
It
I
is
was reading
heartbreaking
something
every time.
I was reading something about that.
Probably one of
about that
Tolkien's
scene.
letters. He talked about that as being such a, as Sam's kind of failing moment, really, in a way.
Yeah. The sadness that Sam is such a moral character, and he has this one fail, really.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's it.
significant.
That was Gollum's last chance.
Yeah, it really was. So sad.
Wow. Yeah. Well, moving on with lightning here.
Because that was more thunderish than lightning.
It was. Yeah. What's the one place in Middle Earth you wish you could visit?
Lorien.
Yeah.
Good choice.
There you go.
Would you rather hang out with the Noldor or the Teleri? Now, assuming this is first age and this is pre-kinslaying, so the Noldor aren't Fëanor or his sons. Just Noldor or Teleri.
Oh, I have a weakness for the Noldor, I'm afraid.
Very good. A craftsman of some sort. Yeah, I understand that.
I'm with you. They represent the best and the flawed
And the worst.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What about a favorite author or book other than Tolkien?
I'm a huge fan of Roger Zelazny
Okay.
as a crossover of science fiction and fantasy. I used to love George Martin. I think I've gotten over it. There's a hot take. Ursula Le Guin.
Oh, yeah. Good choice.
Other books that were formational in my imagination of magic and a luminous world created. I'm having the great pleasure of reading my 10-year-old son A Wizard of Earthsea right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And I am just diving into the lushness and the beauty of her language and the just the bones of her world are magical. And it's not all that different from encountering Tolkien, actually.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree. I will admit that I am just discovering Earthsea for the first time in my life this year, and I just read A Wizard of Earthsea a few months ago, and I fell instantly in love with it.
Yeah.
And as soon as I have some
I
time
will
to read
warn you-
non-Tolkien, I will read the second book.
Yeah. I will warn you when you get to the 5th book. have tissues handy. No more spoiler than that, but have tissues handy because
I will do that.
Yeah, there are moments of transcendence.
Those are some great answers, Christopher. We really appreciate it. We thank you so much for joining us here in the North Wing. I can't tell you how much we've enjoyed our conversation and that story about was it your aunt or your great aunt?
It was my great aunt.
Eleanor, right? I love that. That's what an amazing story. It just brought tears to my eyes thinking about that. I'm so moved by it, and I'm sure our listeners will be as well. So thank you for coming and for sharing such amazing stories with us. We enjoyed that, but it's probably time for us all to head over back to the common room and join the rest of the listeners.
I think so. Thank you so much, Chris. And we hope to have you back for the next Questions After Nightfall.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for everything you do. I mean, you're a major part of my Tolkien fandom right now. So
good.
I so wish that I could get to Nithmoot and meet you guys in person, but maybe next year.
We'd like that very much.
Sounds great.
Well, listeners, we now return you to the podcast already in progress.
Well, that was a fun conversation with Chris.
Yes,
and I hope
was.
our listeners continue to enjoy hearing from others about their experience with Tolkien. I got to say, I just love meeting the people in our Tolkien community. I know I've said it before, but it really is my favorite thing about doing this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And when it comes to meeting people, we've got something exciting coming, don't we, Alan?
Oh, we certainly do. Folks, we want to remind you all of the very big news we shared back a few weeks ago on our 100th episode. And just in case you missed it, the Prancing Pony podcast is teaming up with the Tolkien Society. We will be recording an episode live with the special guests at Tolkien 2019 in Birmingham.
That's right. We're going to be at the largest gathering of Tolkien fans ever for this once-in-a-lifetime event. And the guest list is amazing. There's Tom Shippey, there's Wayne Hammond, Christina Scull, Alan Lee, Ted Naismith, Brian Sibley, Dimitra Femi are all going to be there.
And there's still time for more special guests to be announced. Folks that, if they are there, we intend to bring them to you, listeners of the Prancing Pony podcast.
We absolutely do. And as we get more details, we will be sure to let you know.
Yeah.
In the meantime, today is the last day to order the newly designed t-shirts and hoodies that we're offering to help cover our travel to Birmingham next year.
That's right. Now, folks, we do hate wrapping it up this early, but we want to make sure that everybody gets their goodies by Christmas. So that's why today's the last day. Be sure to act fast. The order window closes at 11:59 Eastern Standard Time tonight. Now, get more information on our Facebook page or Twitter feed to get your hands on the new PPP gear. Now, let's get back to Three is Company.
All right, let's do that. And I have got the first reading today, haven't I?
Yes, you do, sir.
All right. And we are starting right at the beginning, because as I hear...
Well, the beginning of the section.
Yeah, of course.
That only works on every third episode when we actually start a new chapter, doesn't it?
I think it works just fine right now, actually, and I'm going to use it.
I think it does. You shall. You can. You may. I grant thee permission.
And I will, because it is still a very good place to start.
Yes, it is.
The morning came, pale and clammy. Frodo woke up first and found that a tree root had made a hole in his back and that his neck was stiff. Walking for pleasure. Why didn't I drive, he thought, as he usually did at the beginning of an expedition. And all my beautiful feather beds are sold to the Sackville Bagginses. These tree roots would do them good. He stretched. Wake up, hobbits, he cried. It's a beautiful morning. What's beautiful about it? Said Pippin, peering over the edge of his blanket with one eye. Sam, get breakfast ready for 9:30. Have you got the bathwater hot? Sam jumped up, looking rather bleary. No, sir, I haven't, sir, he said.
Yeah. Pippin, I'm telling you, he just strikes me as being a little entitled.
Just a bit, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And obviously, he's joking. He's joking
he
here,
is. I mean, he eventually tells Frodo to go get the water too. I mean,
that's true. He's just kind of having fun with everybody. But yeah,
I do think it's a little bit of that subtle class reminder, though.
I think it is. Yeah, the fact that he just kind of goes to Sam first, and Sam just kind of, oh no, sir, I have. He just kind of takes it. He's used to that.
He is. He's used to taking orders, and Pippin's used to giving them. He's an aristocrat. He's wealthy.
Yeah.
But boy, kind of obnoxious. I did think it was interesting to see Frodo go from in his head thinking, oh, why didn't I drive? This is terrible. But notice that he shifts that when it comes to what he says. This is like good leadership.
Oh,
right there,
that's
right?
True. That's a good point. Yeah, he's not feeling good, but he's it's a beautiful morning. Wake up, hobbits. Yeah, he is showing some really good leadership here, isn't he? Yeah.
If you're having a rough day, but you've got people that work for you, you don't let them see it. You are cheerful and optimistic and
put on a brave face, and you try and motivate them.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting.
That's
and
a good
of course,
catch.
oh, thank you, sir. Why didn't I drive? I couldn't. Well, you didn't even have to drive. You could have just taken a lift. I mean,
You could have, yeah.
they've got to. They've got to have that there.
They've got to have Hobbit Huber,
Yeah,
something
Hobbit
like that.
Uber.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Hoblift. I don't know. These are all. This is going to be terrible.
Hoblift. That sounds like a D&D monster.
It does, doesn't it? Actually, like a combination Griffin Hobbit.
Yeah.
I don't know. The feather bed sold to the Sackville Vikings. That is a real shame, actually.
That is. I mean, he's not going to take them with him, I suppose.
No,
but
I suppose.
But he could have just like shredded them or something. Just the
I mean, I don't know. Isn't it when you buy a house, you don't get beds? I mean,
well,
if when I bought my house they left their bed, I would have burned it. I mean, I don't trust their bed, right? So I don't know. When I move, I take my bed with me. That's just
I would
me.
not. Yeah, I would. I'm surprised Lobelia accepted the beds. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
You'd think she would just assume that Frodo had just, planted a bed bug colony in those beds.
Seriously, yeah.
But obviously, if the dishes convey with the sale of the whole, and the old Wynyards would have if it hadn't all been drunk. Good on you guys.
Right, that's right. Cheers. Yeah, clearly this is a well furnished sale. I will say
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
I wonder, of course, when he says driving, he means a pony cart.
Sure.
As Mary did, right? He and Fatty had left with all their stuff, so it would have been easier. But as we'll find out, it's probably just as well that he didn't, because then he would have been on the road the entire time, and that's a very bad place to be.
That is a very bad place. It's going to be a very, very dangerous place soon.
Yes, it will. So let's see. So they get their day started. Pippin, of course, wants to know where the water is. Frodo's I don't keep water in my pockets.
Let's take a moment to appreciate the fact that Frodo stripped the blankets off of Pippin. Get up. That's basically what he's saying.
Lazy bones.
Yeah.
He is the teenager of the group, isn't he?
Yeah. He's the tween. He's what? Do we determine he's what? 28?
20. Yeah. He's still in his tweens.
In his 20s. Yeah.
Yeah. Still very young and somewhat irresponsible, but. I love that they play around. They have a good rapport. And
they do.
That's
they
obvious.
do. You see a little bit of that the value of fellowship. You just see a bunch of guys having some fun.
Oh yeah, at everybody at each other's expense, right?
Yeah, it's a road trip movie at this point.
It really is. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up the very next section here. It's a very short little piece. When their breakfast was over and their packs all trussed up again, it was after 10 o'clock. As an aside, I'll just say that's a really late start to the day, guys. I mean, I'm just really, you get up and you take like a 2-hour breakfast and then you finally meander onto the road. Okay, I'll just go back to the.
You can't do that in Texas because that only gives you about 3 hours before it starts getting really hot and you don't want to be traveling anymore. Yeah.
Right. No, you did. That's exactly what I'm thinking. So here we go. It was after 10 o'clock and the day was beginning to turn fine and hot. They went down the slope and across the stream where it dived under the road, and up the next slope, and up and down another shoulder of the hills. And by that time, their cloaks, blankets, water, food, and other gear already seemed a heavy burden.
Sorry,
really?
Yeah.
I know.
You're just, we're talking first steps here, guys. Come on.
Yeah, this is going to be a long
This is your first morning
journey
on the road, yeah.
Yeah. This is going to be a really rough, 8 months or something like that? No, when did we figure out they're leaving again? Oh,
they're leaving September, late September.
So March is when, 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, that is going to be a long, long time. They get tougher, though. Good news. They get tougher.
They do. They do get tougher. They experience a few things along the way. They level up.
They do. They definitely level up. They get some XP. Yeah. The day's march promised to be warm and tiring work. After some miles, however, the road ceased to roll up and down. It climbed to the top of a steep bank in a weary, zigzagging sort of way, and then prepared to go down for the last time. In front of them, they saw the lower lands dotted with small clumps of trees that melted away in the distance to a brown woodland haze. They were looking across the woody end towards the Brandywine River. The road wound away before them like a piece of string. "The road goes on forever," said Pippin, "but I can't without a rest. It is high time for lunch."
Of course it is.
At least they have made some progress. It's after some miles, so they've been going for a while.
Yeah. They get a little ways down the road, cross a few hills, and then they think, okay, I can't see home anymore. It's time to take lunch.
It's time to stop. I picked that passage. It doesn't sound like the kind of passage we would normally read, but I loved just this kind of the description of the road itself, the up and down, the across, all the descriptions here really help you visualize this journey that they're on.
Yeah.
Going across a stream where it goes under the road. So you've got kind of a little overpass or, small bridge. You've got up a slope, up and down another shoulder. And then they keep going. You get the zigzags or the, what do you call the switchbacks as you go up the hill.
Yep.
And then you're at the top and you're looking down and you're seeing this beautiful, beautiful landscape, with the trees kind of disappearing into this haze. And there's the Brandywine River over there. Just a beautiful sight.
It's a great set of visual imagery. And it does kind of remind you of the Shire. It gives you a chance to really get to know the Shire. It's kind of like we talked about last time.
You're right.
The Arcadia quote from Wayne Hammond. And it kind of shows you, it gives you that before picture. This is what they're fighting for. This is what they're going to be fighting for later on.
Right.
Yeah.
And what Frodo is willing to give up, which is huge.
Yeah. And I know people give this section of the book a lot of grief because it's very slow moving and things like that. But
I'm grateful that it is. Yeah.
I am too. I've come around to that in recent years. I think at one point I probably would have said the same thing. Oh, it's just get to the point,
Yeah,
but,
I just start at the Council of Elrond and I start there.
You're right. Just pick up there when the Fellowship has already come together. No, you get so much. It really is that before picture. I keep thinking of it as the before picture. And without that, it's you don't really understand exactly what they're fighting for or why it's so important.
It's that beginning stage of development for each of these characters. And you really do start to see the progress that they make, even between here and Bree, let alone the time that they spend with Strider on the way to Rivendell. They're radically different characters by the time they leave the council. So
yeah, that's true.
You definitely don't want to miss this stuff, even if it does move at a slower clip.
Yeah, especially at this point where, this whole journey is just sort of a lark, especially for Pippin. And maybe Sam to a lesser degree. Sam has some sense
Sam's
of
just more excited about seeing the elves than
seeing elves.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is kind of a childishness to both Sam and Pippin's perspective here. Frodo's
the naivete.
got the wisdom. Yeah. Frodo's got the wisdom and the gravitas that we've come to expect from him. But you really do see the journey that these three are going to go on.
You're absolutely right.
Very cool stuff.
And though we won't read the little bit about Sam being anxious to see the elves, he does ask about, elves living in the woods. But I love this little line that his eyes were wide open. He was looking across lands he had never seen to a new horizon. I half expect him to say, "This is it,
If I take
Mr.
one
Frodo.
more step.
If I take one more step.
It'll be the farthest away from home I've ever been."
Yeah. So, because you won the coin toss, you get to read this section with the road poem.
Yay! All right. Frodo was silent. He too was gazing eastward along the road as if he had never seen it before. Suddenly he spoke, aloud, but as if to himself, saying slowly, "The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow, if I can, pursuing it with weary feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet. And whither then, I cannot say." "That sounds like a bit of old Bilbo's rhyming," said Pippin. "Or is it one of your imitations? It does not sound altogether encouraging." "I don't know," said Frodo. "It came to me then as if I was making it up. But I may have heard it long ago. Certainly it reminds me very much of Bilbo in the last years before he went away."
Well, and it should remind him very much of Bilbo because it's almost exactly the same poem that Bilbo, or the same song that Bilbo sang when he left.
That's right.
Earlier this book, just a couple chapters ago.
That's right. And I didn't even pick up on that until you brought it up. That's
with
cool.
the exception of one word. Pursuing it with weary feet. Bilbo was pursuing it with eager feet. And that's a small difference, but it's a noticeable difference. And Tom Shippey had some really good insight on this. He referenced this and says that both hobbits are leaving home, bag end. Bilbo does it, and here I'm going to quote, cheerfully, without the ring, without responsibility, for Rivendell. And then Frodo does it, and here's Shippey's words again, with a growing sense of unwished involvement, carrying the ring, and heading in the end for Mordor. There's a vast difference between Bilbo's departure and Frodo's departure.
That is a vast difference, and it's amazing that you can see exactly that difference with just this change of one word.
Yeah. It's just
and
a
of
tiny
course,
change.
Bilbo would be eager. He's finally leaving the Shire. He's leaving all those people behind. He's going to go to Rivendell. He's going to, he's going to finish his book. Of course, he's eager.
And he's finally got that burden off his shoulders.
The ring off it. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, and how you could tell that immediately lightened his step and changed his mood.
Right.
No wonder his feet were eager.
And yet Frodo's feet are weary because he feels all this weight and all this responsibility. He doesn't want to leave home yet.
This is a huge burden. He knows that the existence, the continued existence of the Shire is dependent on him leaving and possibly destroying this thing that can only be destroyed in one place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. That
is a heavy burden. But yeah, Chippy's words on that were spectacular. It would have taken us about an hour and a half to draw that out.
For sure, yeah.
He's a little pithier than we are.
He is very good at making his point clearly and quickly.
Yes, concisely.
Which we are not. Because you just said pithy, and I just said the same thing in 10 different words.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and pick up immediately after that. We don't often do that where we break in the middle of a paragraph and then have somebody else pick up. But
we'd do it every week if we could.
we would. But this one, there was just a change of theme here, or not theme so much, but change of topic, and we wanted to pick that up.
Yep.
So here Frodo is continuing to talk about what Bilbo used to do. He used often to say there was only one road, that it was like a great river. Its springs were at every doorstep, and every path was its tributary. It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out of your door, he used to say. You step into the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there is no knowing where you might be swept off to. Do you realize that this is the very path that goes through Mirkwood, and that if you let it, it might take you to the Lonely Mountain, or even further, and to worse places? He used to say that on the path outside the front door at Bag End, especially after he had been out for a long walk. That's a great quote.
That is a great quote, and what a deep thing to think about when you just step outside your door. Wow, this is the road that leads all the way.
Yeah,
yeah. I'm
standing. He
at my
knew
front
it
door.
because he'd experienced that. He'd experienced that very thing. Mm-hmm.
He'd stepped out, into this road and
60 years ago, and
ended up at the Lonely Mountain.
Yeah.
And I love, Hammond and Scull had a really cool observation about this idea of the road, road with a capital R even.
Right.
And it really is a recurring image in Tolkien's work. And I think we can all see, there's poems about it. It's mentioned here and how it's so often set up as a contrast to this idea of home, being out on the road, sort of out in the open, now kind of at risk, exposed, as opposed to being at home, the place a hobbit's nature would rather have them be, that hobbity comfort. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, this really is a kind of a Took Baggins thing, isn't it? I mean, the Baggins is home and the Took is the road. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I love this language of, where you might be swept off to. And we've seen Bilbo use that once before, actually, I think in chapter 1 when he left.
You're right.
Yeah. But this is just such a great quote, and it's such an iconic quote, and I think everybody probably hears it in Ian Holmes' voice now, don't you think?
Yeah, except that, and while the films did do a nice job of including this line, I did like the way they transitioned from Frodo talking to Bilbo's voice. They did make an annoying little change that really didn't have to be made. Film Bilbo says you step onto the road, but book Bilbo says you step into the road. And that difference is, at least the way I see it, it's really significant. The metaphor that Bilbo had told Frodo was that of a great river. Springs at every door, every tributary, every path is a tributary. And that's why Bilbo says you step into the road, because you step into this river and it takes you where the river goes. Well, in the film version, that metaphor is lost. Instead of placing yourself into a thing that will take you wherever it goes, you step onto a thing, retaining this sense of control versus that original metaphor, the feeling of having to accept the course that the river takes you.
Right.
I mean, maybe not completely. Bilbo does say, if you let it, it might take you to these places. But notice he doesn't say you can go here or you can go there.
You do lose this idea of being stepping into and being sort of
being swept away. And I mean, you might be able to stop, but if you kept going, it would be only where the river takes you. And that's the thing.
That's interesting. It's a very subtle difference, and
it is.
It is. I mean, I see what you're saying. It's not one that's ever bothered me too much. But
no, it doesn't bother me a ton. But
But I like the implications that you get from into in the book. I really like that. Just this idea of being in a current that you can't control.
Well, yeah, it fits that metaphor. I don't think I don't think that part of the metaphor made the film lines. The part about the river and the springs and the tributary that didn't make it. The swept off your feet thing did, but that's about it.
Right.
And it's just another example of how even the smallest word can change the course of a metaphor. to paraphrase another botched line, but
well done. That's well done.
I have to give a hat tip, by the way, to Alan R., one of our listeners from the UK on this. He was the first one to point this out a while back. And I realized after kind of thinking it through and looking at that, what a difference that one word makes. So
it is interesting. Yeah, it does make quite a bit of difference. And I think the into does match this idea of being swept off a little bit more, because being swept away with the current, you get that.
There's almost a passivity to it as opposed to that active decision making. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember saying something about that in one of the episodes on chapter 1, of how Bilbo's just sort of, kind of trusting to fate with this. He's just kind of like going out there, whatever happens, happens. And that's a really powerful image.
That is.
It's a good catch.
Well, thank you, sir. I catch those little things now and then. So they do keep moving. They have their lunch. They grab a bite and then they keep moving. And I'm going to have you pick up at one of the first creepy moments of the book.
All right. I can hear a pony or a horse coming along the road behind, said Sam. They looked back, but the turn of the road prevented them from seeing far. I wonder if that is Gandalf coming after us, said Frodo. But even as he said it, he had a feeling that it was not so, and a sudden desire to hide from the view of the rider came over him. It may not matter much, he said apologetically, but I would rather not be seen on the road, by anyone. I'm sick of my doings being noticed and discussed. And if it is Gandalf, he added as an afterthought, we can give him a little surprise, to pay him out for being so late. Let's get out of sight. The other two ran quickly to the left and down into a little hollow not far from the road. There they lay flat. Frodo hesitated for a second. Curiosity, or some other feeling, was struggling with his desire to hide.
No, foreboding.
Some other feeling. That is
some other feeling.
That is foreboding.
Yeah.
I mean, he really wants to hide. There's really some conflict here.
There is. Yeah, and even earlier, we see that Frodo, even though he said he wondered if it was Gandalf, realized this may not be, and he just suddenly desired to hide from the view of the rider.
It's kind of wishful thinking, and he realizes it's wishful thinking as soon as he says it. Yeah.
This is bad.
That is foreboding.
And he knows that there are, he has no idea yet that there are enemies in the Shire, but
True.
There's something. He knows
this is bad news. He knows this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, doesn't feel right. That's a good way to put it. This is a gut thing more than anything else at this point.
What's the thing they say about Aragorn later about looking
feeling fair
and
smelling foul? And
yeah. This looks foul and feels foul and smells foul and everything.
Yeah, this is just rancid all the way.
This is just all foul.
Yeah, it's terrible. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up shortly thereafter. Round the corner came a black horse. No hobbit pony, but a full-sized horse, and on it sat a large man who seemed to crouch in the saddle, wrapped in a great black cloak and hood, so that only his boots and the high stirrups showed below. His face was shadowed and invisible. When it reached the tree and was level with Frodo, the horse stopped. The riding figure sat quite still with its head bowed, as if listening. From inside the hood came a noise, as of someone sniffing to catch an elusive scent. The head turned from side to side of the road. A sudden, unreasoning fear of discovery laid hold of Frodo, and he thought of his ring. He hardly dared to breathe, and yet the desire to get it out of his pocket became so strong that he began slowly to move his hand. He felt that he had only to slip it on, and then he would be safe. The advice of Gandalf seemed absurd. Bilbo had used the ring, and I'm still in the Shire, he thought, as his hand touched the chain on which it hung. At that moment, the rider sat up and shook the reins. The horse stepped forward, walking slowly at first, and then breaking into a quick trot. Frodo crawled to the edge of the road and watched the rider until he dwindled into the distance. He could not be quite sure, but it seemed to him that suddenly Before it passed out of sight, the horse turned aside and went into the trees on the right. Okay, now we're in full-blown creepy mode, aren't we?
This is spooky. This is spooky time.
Yeah. This is where the tone shift really comes back. You know,
Do you remember the first time you read this book? Do you remember what you felt about this the first time? I mean,
I don't know what I remembered when I felt this particular moment, but the next encounter I definitely remembered, because by that point I was more conscious of it.
Yeah. I remember the paperback I had actually had on the back, you know, the little blurb on the back said something like, the dark, fearsome ring wraiths are looking for a hobbit, or something like that.
Oh goodness. Okay.
And so that was
that
foreboding.
changes it.
That was a great blurb, and it really got me interested in the book before I started reading it. But then when I got to this part, I was like, oh, well, that must be one of those ring wraiths.
Right.
Like, well, oops,
Thanks
spoilers,
for the spoiler.
you know. But still, it was. So I knew it was definitely as bad as it seemed. But I'm curious, you know, what other people's experience of this is.
Yeah, the second time they have the writer, when you know the elves finally, and we'll get to that later. That's I think the one when I finally started getting, you know, a little scared as a kid.
Yeah.
You know,
the
desire to slip on the ring became stronger, and you know, it was just this scary thing about the black shadow. You know, they were looking at up at the night.
Yeah,
and they could kind of see the black shadow crossing the stars.
It does kind of get creepier and creepier, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It gets more scary, more fearful for sure.
Yeah, and in just a moment we'll talk about why that is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a powerful moment. I mean, you can see that this guy is not from around here. You know, he's a large man.
Right. That alone is a problem.
Yeah. Wrapped in a black cloak and hood
and sniffing for something.
Ooh, that's just that's weird.
That's a creepy thing.
It's animal. It's predatory.
Yeah, exactly. Predatory is the word I'm looking for. I mean, this is a wolf looking for its prey. This is some sort of apex predator sniffing the air for its prey.
And the fact that you can't see his face or even his body, it dehumanizes it to the point where all you're left with is this sniffing and this darkness.
Yeah.
Oh, it's powerful.
No doubt about it. You've got a little bit from one of the letters, don't you?
Yeah, because when this chapter was first written, this wasn't a ring wraith. This was something very different. Actually, this came from letter number 26, which was written in March 1938, and Tolkien was writing this to Stanley Unwin, and he's mostly talking about C.S. Lewis's book Out of the Silent Planet. But then at the end of the letter, he says, "The sequel to The Hobbit has now progressed as far as the end of the 3rd chapter. But stories tend to get out of hand, and this has taken an unpremeditated turn." Now, according to Hammond and Scull, this unpremeditated turn Tolkien's talking about was his decision to make this writer not Gandalf.
Yep.
It was originally supposed to be Gandalf, and he changed it to make the hobbits actually be pursued, you know, to kind of up the drama a little bit, up the tension and the peril and everything. It does add some peril here. Amazing that this could have been Gandalf, and you see a little vestige of that in Frodo thinking that it might be.
Exactly.
Just for a split second. But yeah, I mean, you see the peril here. You see how creepy this makes the book. And so it's really no surprise that 6 months later, Tolkien was writing to Unwin again, and he said that The Lord of the Rings was becoming more terrifying than The Hobbit. It may prove quite unsuitable. It is more adult.
I love that letter, because right after that, and even though it doesn't have any direct connection to this chapter, I'm still going to read the lines because they're worth reading for another point altogether.
Why not?
He says, "The darkness of the present days has had some effect on it, though it is not an allegory. I have already had one letter from America asking for an authoritative exposition of the allegory of the Hobbit." I mean, you could practically hear the professor's eyes rolling at that one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he had been texting Stanley Unwin, there would have been an eye roll emoji in there for sure.
Maybe 3 or 4 in a row.
Right. He would have just done the whole box of them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, you say it doesn't have any direct connection to this chapter, and I guess it doesn't directly, but you really can see if this was the chapter where he started adding some of that darkness. I mean, you can really see how, I mean, this is late 1938, right? So, I mean, the world is getting to be a very dark place. And so you can see where if he's surrounded by this and if he's feeling apprehensive, if he's just feeling,
Mm-hmm.
unhappy about the state of the world, how that darkness is going to work its way
That's true.
into a story. I mean, again, that doesn't make it allegorical.
No,
but it's
and he's very clear to say it. It is not an
Right.
allegory, but the
Right.
darkness of the present days has had some effect on it. I should probably point that out, because this is letter number 34, and that's dated the 13th of October, 1938.
Okay.
If you know your history, that's about 2 weeks after the Munich Accords or Munich Convention, where most of Europe gave the Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia to Hitler. And Neville
right.
Chamberlain came back to England and swore that we were going to have peace in our time.
Oh, yeah, this is peace for our time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we're talking, handing over an entire land, a part of a sovereign country, to Adolf Hitler and his ever-growing war machine. This was really the beginnings of an inevitable World War II.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that having
And that
experienced
sense of
that
foreboding
before,
had
just,
to be everywhere.
25 years ago. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here he is. Great. Now I'm seeing these things happen again.
Yeah.
No doubt. Darkness.
Yeah, no kidding. He's got to be feeling very dark about the world.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, again, it doesn't have to be allegorical. It's not allegorical. It's just that writers write what they know, and they write from their experience.
They write what they experience. That's true.
And if this is what Tolkien's experiencing at this point, of course that's what he's going to write. And
the world,
it's not,
the primary world is becoming more evil. Well, then the secondary world is going to become a little more evil, isn't it?
That's right, exactly. And there's going to be some harsh realities, and that translates to it being more adult. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. And this
is a good catch. I'm glad you brought in that historical, the historical connection. The Munich
Well, it's again, I hesitate sometimes to do that because I don't want people thinking, "Ooh, allegory." But like you said, you can't get away from the fact that writers are impacted by that. And Tolkien even acknowledged as such. I mean, if we go back to the earlier part of the prologue, he talks about how an author cannot remain unaffected by his experience. The ways in which a story germ uses the soil of experience are extremely complex. And so, there is going to be some influence, and it's impossible to avoid it. But it's not allegorical, and we needed to make that clear. So
right.
There you go.
That's great.
Yeah, well, that's what people listen to us for. We try to bring in those interesting bits. All right, well, let's go ahead and get back on track though, because it's going to be a very long night, folks. If we're halfway through the episode, and we're only on like the second point of the chapter, so we're going to keep moving. But the ring at work, right? I mean, we're seeing the ring at work in Frodo's thinking about how absurd Gandalf's advice was.
Oh yeah,
the wisest of the Maiar.
Yeah.
Gives you advice, and you're thinking that it's absurd,
and you're thinking it's going to be absurd. Well, it's clearly the ring at work. It's interesting that it kind of works through ridicule and rationalizing in a way. It's ridiculing it as absurd, but it's also rationalizing it. It's like, oh, you don't have to do it.
Bilbo used it. Bilbo used it. You're still in the Shire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a huge battle between Frodo's will and what the ring is telling him to do.
It's almost like the serpent in the garden. Really, I mean, it's
sure, yeah.
Is that really what he said? Oh, you can have this. Come on.
Sure. I mean, it's temptation. It's temptation in a very pure form.
Yeah. And it's working from the inside. That's the thing. The ring is already at work in his mind, in his thought process. That's just. That's a creepy thing to realize that the ring can affect his thoughts.
These thoughts are coming from himself. Yeah.
Yes. That's the thing. That's the hardest part here. I think that's going to be difficult for him to overcome, is because he's having this argument within himself. It's not as though he senses this as an external force. This is from inside himself, and he's having to fight that thought also from inside himself. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the writer leaves just in time. Good timing there. I'm not sure. We'll find out a little bit why.
Do we have a reason why here? I can't remember.
I believe in the original drafts, Gildor talks about this with him, and he thinks that the reason that the writer left the first time was because the presence of his two friends threw him off track, that he was sniffing and couldn't catch out the scent because there were three of them, and he wasn't sure.
Three riders. Okay.
No, not three riders. Three Pippin, Frodo, and Sam. Because he was with his friends, that threw him off in terms of the scent. I believe that was in one of the earlier drafts. I don't remember which one. Possibly the same one. We'll find out later that Gildor, really actually talks about what it is Frodo's carrying. But that part all changed. So,
I'm
yeah,
okay.
it seems like it might have been that.
I'm glad you had some memory of that because I'm sitting here trying to remember why. But yeah, okay, good.
I have no memory of that story.
We'll look. Sorry, we'll look for that a little later.
Yeah, we will. Just to confirm that, we'll probably include that in the postscript. So for those of you
sure.
on in the fellowship of the podcast, you'll get more information there.
There you go.
Then we're moving on to the Hobbit's reaction to the ring wraith. Frodo, of course, that's disturbing. Pippin and Sam had never seen anything, so Frodo had to describe it to them, including the sniffing. And Pippin says, what's one of the big people got to do with this? What's he even doing here?
Right. Why is he even here? Why?
Exactly.
How could this possibly be? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, before you get to the next passage where Sam talks about all this, there's a line that Frodo mentions that I wanted to explore just real briefly. He says that down in the South Farthing, they've had trouble with big people, I believe. Well, you know us, folks. When we see a line like that, our first thought is, well, what trouble are they having? What big people?
Right.
So we're going to go down all those little side bits and pieces here.
We're not going to leave that on the table. We're not going to leave that stone unturned.
No, we might miss some things, but we're not going to miss this one. And it seems to me that this is quite possibly evidence of Saruman's renewed focus, or I should say new focus, as he'd ignored it
because he was not previously interested, right?
That's correct, on the Shire. And I get to that because I was recently rereading The Hunt for the Ring in Unfinished Tales. By the way, there is a lot of good stuff in there that's probably going to find its way into upcoming episodes, so just be aware of that.
It's all right in this time frame, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And I came across this. Saruman had long taken an interest in the Shire because Gandalf did, and he was suspicious of him. Latterly, other motives were added. He liked to extend his power, especially into Gandalf's province, and he found that the money he could provide for the purchase of Leaf was giving him power, and was corrupting some of the hobbits, especially the Bracegirdles, who owned many plantations, and so also the Sackville Bagginses. The footnote here is fun. Tolkien reminds us that Lobelia Bracegirdle married Otho Sackville Baggins. So yeah, a charming family indeed, and corrupt as can be.
One more reason to love Lobelia, isn't it? Yes. Her corrupt family.
She does have a moment of redemption at the end. It's so good.
And their tobacco profiteering, yes.
Yeah, exactly. This is big tobacco.
Yeah, right. Big tobacco.
Oh, goodness.
But Tolkien actually continues in that. He says, but also he had begun to feel certain that in some way the Shire was connected with the ring in Gandalf's mind.
Yep.
Why this strong guard upon it? He therefore began to collect detailed information about the Shire, its chief persons and families, its roads and other matters. For this he used hobbits within the Shire, in the pay of the Bracegirdles and the Sackville Bagginses. But his agents were men of Dunlandish origin.
Aha.
So, quite possibly then, these men, these big folk that were causing trouble in the South Farthing were some of these Dunlandings, these Dunlandish men who were in the employ of Saruman, the traitor. And it does kind of show you, when you come back in the Scouring of the Shire later on, and, you see Lotho, who's, in the employ of Saruman.
Totally under his thumb, yeah.
Yeah, and you see that this stuff has been in the works for a long time. He's already sinking his claws into the Sackville Bagginses and the Bracegirdles.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's in the long con, too,
He sure is.
But I'm going to have you take this next passage about Sam explaining who the Black Rider is.
All right, Sam's got a little information. Begging your pardon, put in Sam suddenly. I know where he comes from. It's from Hobbiton that this here Black Rider comes, unless there's more than one. And I know where he's going, too. What do you mean? Said Frodo sharply, looking at him in astonishment. Why didn't you speak up before? I have only just remembered, sir. It was like this. When I got back to our hole yesterday evening with the key, my dad, he says to me, Hello, Sam, he says. I thought you were away with Mr. Frodo this morning. There's been a strange customer asking for Mr. Baggins of Bag End, and he's only just gone. I've sent him on to Bucklebury. Not that I like the sound of him. He seemed mighty put out when I told him Mr. Baggins had left his old home for good. Hissed at me, he did. It gave me quite a shudder. What sort of fellow was he? Says I to the gaffer. I don't know, says he. But he wasn't a hobbit. He was tall and black-like, and he stooped over me. I reckon it was one of the big folk from foreign parts. He spoke funny. I couldn't stay to hear more, sir, since you were waiting, and I didn't give much heed to it myself. The gaffer's getting old and more than a bit blind, and it must have been near dark when this fellow come up the hill and found him taking the air at the end of our row. I hope he hasn't done no harm, sir, nor me.
Wow. Well, that sheds some light on things, doesn't it?
Quite a bit of information there, yeah.
Some useful stuff.
That Frodo might have found out.
Frodo would have been useful to know.
If he had only gone and asked the
What's
gaffer.
that line from The Wedding Singer? Things I would have liked to know yesterday.
Yeah,
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Spot on. In the last episode, we wondered whether the gaffer really thought Frodo and Sam were gone already.
That's
or whether
right.
He was just covering
we
for
weren't
them.
sure, and now we know, don't we? Yeah.
I remember I was just listening to that earlier today, and we were just thinking, I guess we have to speculate on this one. But no, the answer is actually
Oops. Or
right
we could just
here.
read 6 pages ahead and
Right,
there's
exactly.
the answer.
Let's just keep reading this book that we've read 12, 20 times before.
Let's just do our job.
Right. But he really did think they were gone. So so that's interesting. But
and that's just as well. I don't know that he could have maintained a lie in the face of that sort of intimidation and fear.
Could be. Yeah, could be. I mean, I get the sense that the Black Riders aren't really pulling out all the stops just yet.
Well,
but,
no.
But if it had, I mean, I don't think he would have withstood them.
No, I don't. I love the gaffer, but let's be honest about his capabilities, shall we?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Potatoes he's good with.
Yeah.
Nazgul, not so much.
That's right. Not so much.
Mighty put out. He hissed at me. Can you imagine what that must feel like for a plain old hobbit of the Shire? Like, these strange big folk always going around hissing at people.
Goodness. And he talked funny. Of course, I'm sure to the hobbits, most men probably spoke funny anyway.
Probably, yeah. We know how they feel about foreigners, and this guy is
a
really
real
as foreign as they come.
He is as foreign as they come. Yeah.
His size, his speech, his clothing. I mean, tall and black. Well, black, I think we need to acknowledge that's a reference to his clothing.
Right.
And that's that's obviously very strange. They've never seen anything like that.
No. Hobbits dress in bright colors, chiefly yellow and green.
Right, that's right.
So, this is very, very different. Frodo, of course, acknowledges right away, look, the gaffer can't be blamed. And I should have probably looked into this because I heard him talking to somebody who seemed to be asking about me. And Frodo, I love what he says. I wish I had, or you had told me about it before. I might have been more careful on the road. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm thinking so.
I mean, he's had a few things on his mind. Let's give him some,
well, yes.
Cut him a little slack. He's got a lot on his mind.
Frodo's had a lot on his mind, and Sam had a lot on his mind. I mean, after all, he had to figure out a way to say goodbye to the beer. So he wasn't
There's only one way to say goodbye to the beer.
To the beer barrel? Yeah.
Yes. By kissing it.
That's right. A lengthy kiss.
Sealed with a kiss. Drained with a kiss.
Drained with a kiss. Good stuff. Frodo says he wished he'd waited for Gandalf. And then he admits, well, maybe that would have made things worse. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think the story would be over if you'd waited for Gandalf any longer.
I'm imagining the shortest sequel to The Hobbit ever.
Yeah. Where the Black Riders find Frodo in his house.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what do you know? There's the ring. Take this back to Mordor.
Yep.
So Pippin, of course, is completely in the dark on this, right? He has no idea what's going on. He's even saying, well, so you know something about this rider then? Frodo's like, I don't know, and I'd rather not guess. Mm. He says he answers questions as clearly as Gandalf does, apparently.
He's learned well, yeah.
He has learned well. So
some wizard's pupil.
They're going to keep moving, and I'm going to read this lovely little, again, another road passage. There's really nothing important in the next 2 paragraphs that I'm going to read, but
it's a cool one. It's just enjoying the Shire.
Even
after this fright they've had, they're able to
and I think that's part of that's that Hobbit nature, that they're resilient.
Yeah.
So here we go. The shadows of the trees were long and thin on the grass as they started off again. They now kept a stone's throw to the left of the road and kept out of sight of it as much as they could. But this hindered them, for the grass was thick and tussocky, and the ground uneven, and the trees began to draw together into thickets. The sun had gone down red behind the hills at their backs, and evening was coming on before they came back to the road at the end of the long level over which it had run straight for some miles. At that point, it bent left and went down into the lowlands of the Yale, making for Stock, but a lane branched right, winding through a wood of ancient oak trees on its way to Woodhall. "That is the way for us," said Frodo. Not far from the road meeting, they came on the huge hulk of a tree. It was still alive and had leaves on the small branches that it had put out round the broken stumps of its long-fallen limbs, but it was hollow and could be entered by a great crack on the side away from the road. The hobbits crept inside and sat there upon a floor of old leaves and decayed wood. They rested and had a light meal, talking quietly and listening from time to time. I love that.
A little bit more fellowship. I like that.
Exactly. It's the more about that importance of fellowship. We get more trees. In this case, we get these ancient oaks. It's just a lovely place.
Yeah.
And the idea of the three of them being able to fit into this large tree, it must be huge.
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah.
They've got their packs with them. They have a light meal.
I mean, they're hobbits, but they got it. They want room to spread out for sure.
Oh yeah.
There must be tons of room. Yeah.
Bigger than my booth, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I couldn't fit three hobbits
not room
in here.
For, there probably wouldn't be room for two of us in your booth.
No, not with food.
No. Nope. But, I had some word nerdery here on the Yale.
Oh, yeah.
That I wanted
to
bring
Yale.
In just because
I love that. It's not the Harvard. It's not the Columbia. It's not the Browns.
It's not the Woodhall Community College of the South Farthing or East Farthing, or wherever we are here.
Shire State University, Woodhall. Yeah.
Go fighting Bounders.
That's right.
No, I saw that in there. It's like, it is an odd word. I'm only really familiar with it as the name of the university.
Right, right.
And it's not a terribly important place, but, I'm not going to leave an interesting word on the table and not look into it a little bit. Especially when Hammond and Scull make it pretty easy for me. They actually had something on this. It's so nice. It's such a great book. Yes, this is from the Lord of the Rings Reader's Companion, in case that wasn't clear. Yeah. But yeah, it says, Hammond and Scull say it may be derived from obsolete Welsh Yal, hill country. Now, it's a region. It's not a particular place or settlement, and that's according to notes by Christopher Tolkien in Return of the Shadow.
Right.
But yeah, it is a reference to it. So you just imagine this kind of hill country region that we're passing.
It's called the
Yale. It certainly fits.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In Appendix F and in some notes he made to a Dutch translator, Tolkien did say that there were some Celtic elements in both Buckland and East Farthing names. So since that's where we are in the Shire right now, this Welsh origin does fit.
You're right, it does.
So
right, it does.
Just a neat little reminder that Tolkien was, very comfortable with Welsh and the Celtic languages as well as Germanic.
Always at work finding unique places to fit those kinds of inspirations in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and giving each area its own unique feel. You know, and
right.
if you look at Appendix F, especially, I remember him talking a little bit about why it was important to make those place names sound kind of Celtic, and it's just really cool, just to kind of give them their own identity.
Yeah.
Feel
and we'll
like
get
some of those
that
places
when we get to the
England
appendices in season 9.
7 years, yeah. Yeah.
I've got you picking up the reading right after I left off, because here we get an interesting moment, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Twilight was about them as they crept back to the lane. The west wind was sighing in the branches. Leaves were whispering. Soon the road began to fall gently but steadily into the dusk. A star came out above the trees in the darkening east before them. They went abreast and in step to keep up their spirits. After a time, as the stars grew thicker and brighter, the feeling of disquiet left them, and they no longer listened for the sound of hoofs. They began to hum softly, as hobbits have a way of doing as they walk along, especially when they are drawing near to home at night. With most hobbits it is a supper song or a bed song, but these hobbits hummed a walking song, though not, of course, without any mention of supper and bed. Bilbo Baggins had made the words, to a tune that was as old as the hills, and taught it to Frodo as they walked in the lanes of the water valley, and talked about adventure. Upon the hearth the fire is red, beneath the roof there is a bed, but not yet weary are our feet, still round the corner we may meet a sudden tree or standing stone that none have seen but we alone. Tree and flower and leaf and grass, let them pass, let them pass. Hill and water under sky, pass them by, pass them by.
Very good. And we would have, of course, had you read the whole thing if
I
we
would
could.
love to read. I would love to read the whole thing if I could, but I will have
As
to
we've
stop.
talked about, we don't read the entirety of any of the lengthier poems just because we want to make sure we stay on the right side of the law. But
exactly. But a beautiful one.
It really is.
Such a great poem.
I mean, not only before we even get to the poem itself, just the passage ahead of that or prior to that, the fact that they kept up their spirits by walking together and, abreast. And then as the stars grew thicker and brighter, the feeling of disquiet left them.
You
there's
feel their
something
spirits lifting as this paragraph goes on.
And there's something about the stars, isn't there? And we'll get to that a little bit more later, but there's something so significant about the stars. I think we'll see that mostly in the next episode, that cheers them up, that brings their spirits up. And this sense of fellowship again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we see stars are a symbol of hope.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen that since the Silmarillion.
All the way since Varda created them, yeah.
Since Varda created them in Chapter 3 of the Silmarillion. And Chapter 24, the Star of High Hope and Bilbo going into Rivendell. Yeah, I mean, we see this all over, and it's very significant. I love it. Some of the star passages are some of my favorites in Tolkien's work.
They really are. Well, other than the ones about Eärendil. We know those are your absolute favorites.
But
they
he
often
is also
go together.
A star, so they go together.
And then, of course, there's the song itself. Bilbo had taught it to him. And I love this, that as they walked in the lanes and talked about adventure with a capital A.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's like they talked about the concept. They didn't just talk about adventures.
Specific adventures. They talked about the concept of adventure.
Yeah, the idea of adventure.
That's really cool. And that's why we get the idea, that I think Tolkien discussed this with Gandalf in Chapter 2, that he imagined he would, run off on some adventure like Bilbo did. Some of those, it's almost like the notions that he grew up with, childhood notions that he got from Uncle Bilbo or Cousin Bilbo.
Yeah.
I do that all the time. I know Tolkien does it too. But,
I know.
I think, he learned all this stuff. And so, you can kind of see where he got some of these ideas from. It's so cool.
Absolutely. It really is. Just as a sidebar, though, if you'd recall, way back in episode 86, we talked about Tolkien's possible inspirations for, both this song and the road song earlier in the chapter. I mean,
right.
You'll see why both really are relevant. But John Ratliff had suggested there was a poem by G.B. Smith, Tolkien's friend and fellow member of the TCBS, that could have been part of the inspiration. Here's a line from that. "This is the road the Romans made, this track half lost in the green hills, or fading in a forest glade mid violets and daffodils." A little bit, you got the flowers, you got the road, you've got this fading track that's kind of the road one may have more to do with that, but
I think so. And I remember we also talked about this, that Ratliff thought that the much closer parallel to this poem, I think specifically, was a poem called Romance by E.F.A. Geach.
Yeah.
And this was published in a 1922 book of children's poems on the page right after Tolkien's own poem, Goblin Feet.
Right.
So we know that, Tolkien would have been aware of this poem. And there's I got a few lines from that poem too. It goes, "Round the next corner and in the next street, adventure lies in wait for you. Oh, who can tell what you may meet round the next corner and in the next street?"
Wow. Now, we didn't read that second stanza, but if you compare that to the lines of the second stanza about round the corner, there may wait a new road or secret gate. Very, very similar to that in terms of
a lot of that. Yeah. Just the idea of and you get this idea of, all these different paths branching off, around all these corners. And there's definitely a strong sense of that in Tolkien's poem.
Yeah, there really is.
Really cool.
And then I wanted to point out that the third verse, interestingly, if you look at those words, those of you who've seen the films will recognize them very, very clearly. Just a very slightly altered version of that third verse ended up being the song that Pippin sang upon Denethor's request. So it's the one you hear in the background when Faramir is making his charge to Osgiliath.
Right.
It's a much more somber tune than I expect Bilbo would have taught.
Much more somber. And, well, I remember we talked about this when we talked about the movies back in episode 50. And I think we disagreed a little bit about that scene because it was one of the ones that I picked as one that actually worked in the movie, even though it was telling a very different story. But it was still
I
an
don't know that we
effective
disagreed
scene.
much. I agreed it worked cinematically. I just didn't particularly
But it
care
was the
for
changing
it.
of the core of the original. Yeah, it
Yes,
kind of changed
yes.
Denethor. I think we
Yeah.
were talking more about Denethor more than anything.
Yeah.
I think,
But really, it changes the song, too, because
it really
I'm looking
does,
at it
because-
now. Those
Mhm.
first 4 lines are almost the same, aren't they? But then
Yeah.
you get the 5th line in the written poem here is then world behind and home ahead. But when Pippin sings it, it's home is behind, the world ahead. So it's totally flipped. We skip the we'll wander back to home and bed. We get straight to mist and twilight,
I think he
cloud
says
and
mist
shade.
and shadow, cloud and
Mist
shade,
and shadow,
all
cloud
shall
and
fade,
shade,
right?
all shall fade.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't get meat, bread, fire, lamp, or bed.
No.
Totally changes the tone.
But we do get Denethor eating very disgustingly. So
Yes, we
there's
do.
that.
We do. We get like cherry tomatoes and
It really does change. I mean, what a change it is. I mean, it's because this is such it's such a bold, adventurous song here.
it
in the
is,
book.
isn't it?
It's all about exploring. It's about experiencing life. It's about, having an adventure. And the film does turn it into something very mournful, very somber. And it almost, because it's coming at the end of Pippin's journey, it almost makes it seem as though Pippin is sad maybe not sad at the path he's taken, but he's sad at some of the things that have happened along the way. He's mourning, in a sense.
Yeah.
Maybe he's mourning some of his lost innocence. I don't know. But although it's a very different story, I do think it's very effective in the movie.
Oh, yeah,
And
it
it's
is. I
amazing
agree.
how they can get such a different tone out of these words with music, obviously, and just a few small word changes.
Well, and removing some of all the positive, happy parts of
some
the
of
song.
the happy, homey stuff. Sure.
Fire and lamp and meat and bread. That's right out, along with Tom Bombadil and the scouring of the Shire. We're done.
That's true.
No.
Yeah.
The stanzas are interesting, right? You've got the first one about how, they're not tired yet. This joy of discovery is keeping them going.
For
The
sure.
second one is focused on the destinations, right? I mean, it's don't take the new roads. Don't get sidetracked. Keep going. Tomorrow we may come back and take these paths, but for now we're going to keep on going. We're going to pass these Applethorn, Nut Slough, Sanding Stone, Pool and Dell. We're going past those and getting to the destination.
Well, and that's interesting because I think, I really noticed this idea that we can take these new roads another day. I don't think I would have said it as they're focused on the destination, although I see how you say that. To me, it's all about just experiencing the road you're on,
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah,
not even,
I can see that.
To me, it's not even as much about the destination. It's just, here's where we are now, and let's
Good
not worry
point.
about these other paths. But
That's a good point, yeah.
I think both work, honestly.
Sure.
But apple, thorn, and nut and slow. There was some cool stuff on this from Hammond and Scull. They actually had said that these are representative plants of the English countryside, and so we're talking about crab apples and hawthorn, hazel or hazelnuts, and sloe, which is blackthorn.
Okay.
And I also looked at this in Walter Judd and Graham Judd's Flora of Middle Earth.
I was wondering if you looked it up in Flora. I don't have that one.
That's a cool book. I haven't read through it. Cover to cover, but there's some really neat stuff in there. They kind of said the same thing. They said that these are all plants that you would see in hedgerows and roadsides in rural England. So it's stuff that would have been very familiar to Tolkien and very familiar to English readers, I'm sure.
Makes sense. And not very familiar to us, sadly.
No.
I really wish I could walk across countryside like the Shire, that's for sure.
I wish we had that kind of stuff to walk through. We just don't.
I know. I'm sure maybe that we do in some parts of the country, but where we've lived, I've been in Southern California my whole life, just about, and I know you've lived in
in
New
the South
Orleans
and in the West, and maybe East Coast. I could probably imagine there
maybe
might be
New
some of
England
this stuff,
or maybe like Kentucky or Tennessee or something where it's a lot of green and
maybe so
and hilly country. I don't know.
Yeah. And I do live in the Texas Hill Country, but it's just not really walkable. I mean, it's green, but it's I'm not walking
it's
around.
miles and miles. You can't. Everything's
exactly.
big. You can't.
Got to get in my truck to go anywhere. Come on, that's what Texas is all about. Get in your truck and drive.
That's right. There are more trucks in Texas than there are vehicles in the United Kingdom, from what I understand.
Is that true?
No, I don't know. I actually pulled that out of my.
Because that's a great statistic. That would be a great statistic if it were.
As Mark Twain said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics.
And statistics, right?
I'm pretty sure I just gave you a mix of the second and third of those. But
well, it sounded convincing. So
it did, didn't it? It's all in the delivery, my friend. It's all in the delivery.
It's great.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pick up shortly after that with Frodo in this little section here about the return of the Black Rider, or a different Black Rider. We don't know.
All right.
Hush, said Frodo. I think I hear hooves again. They stopped suddenly and stood as silent as tree shadows, listening. There was a sound of hooves in the lane, some way behind, but coming slow and clear down the wind. Quickly and quietly they slipped off the path and ran into the deeper shade under the oak trees. Don't let us go too far, said Frodo. I don't want to be seen, but I want to see if it is another Black Rider. Very well, said Pippin, but don't forget the sniffing. The hooves drew nearer. They had no time to find any hiding place better than the general darkness under the trees. Sam and Pippin crouched behind a large tree bole, while Frodo crept back a few yards towards the lane. It showed gray and pale, a line of fading light through the wood. Above it, the stars were thick in the dim sky, but there was no moon. The sound of hooves stopped. As Frodo watched, he saw something dark pass across the lighter space between two trees and then halt. It looked like the black shade of a horse, led by a smaller black shadow. The black shadow stood close to the point where they had left the path, and it swayed from side to side. Frodo thought he heard the sound of snuffling. The shadow bent to the ground and then began to crawl towards him. Once more the desire to slip on the ring came over Frodo, but this time it was stronger than before. So strong that almost before he realized what he was doing, his hand was groping in his pocket. But at that moment, there came a sound like mingled song and laughter. Clear voices rose and fell in the starlit air. The black shadow straightened up and retreated. It climbed onto the shadowy horse and seemed to vanish across the lane into the darkness on the other side. Frodo breathed again.
Wow.
Yikes!
I'm not really sure what we could say about this passage that would.
I know. There's not
really
a lot to say.
There's so much there. It's
The
just it's there. It's just right there.
Yeah.
It's just right there in the text. It's just such a powerfully written moment in the text.
There are a couple of things that are worth noting, though. I mean, Frodo was frankly far too curious for my taste. He crept back a few yards towards the lane. I know he wanted to see.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would have crept any closer. That's a moment of bravery, maybe foolishness, but bravery.
I wonder if the ring was in any way responsible for that.
Well, I don't know, because we see
we don't see the conflict. We don't see the conflict there. But
right. And he's already said, I want to see if it's another Black Rider.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, I don't know. But
so, yeah,
boy,
you're right. There's just curiosity there.
What a scary moment, though. The idea of this darkness just passing over. You can only see it because it's blocking the stars. And, just...
The shadow bent to the ground and then crawling towards him. Again, that's just one of those...
Whoa.
It's just one of those inhuman things. It's a bit like the sniffling, to begin with.
It's the predator animal again. This is he's stalking him. He's not walking through the woods, with his sword out ready to take him on. He's down on his hands and knees, following the trail, get his face to the ground, sniffing his way to find Frodo. Oh, and it's so powerful, the call of the ring, that it's now not just controlling his thoughts and putting thoughts into his mind. It's now moving his limbs for him. His hand is in his pocket before he even realizes. Yeah. That is intense. That is very serious power.
This is close to a breaking point.
Oh, it really is, and it would be.
Yeah.
It absolutely would have been had he not been saved by this mini eucatastrophe of sorts, really.
Yay, I know.
Yay.
Yeah, it really is. It is truly a mini eucatastrophe. I mean,
absolutely is.
There are lots of little eucatastrophes throughout this book. It's not all eagles and finger biting. I mean, it's little things throughout. You really see how it's just woven into the fabric of the story.
I tried to teach my kids not to bite their fingernails. I've never had to teach them not to bite their fingers.
Or to bite your fingers, like,
well, yeah,
I really like your wedding ring. Can I have that? Chomp.
Dad of the 9 fingers. What a moment! I mean, the arrival of these elves, and we're gonna wrap up the chapter on that in just a second. But the arrival of the elves is a masterful moment. I mean, this is that mini eucatastrophe. It's the first of many, and it is that counterpoint to the power of the ring, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It has to be a breaking point, almost a breaking point, for Frodo, for that catastrophe to be significant.
It really does.
He has to be about to lose. He has to be almost at the moment of failure. Yep.
Yeah. And he would have been, no doubt about it. He's not even with Sam and Pippin. They're behind, crouched under that large tree bole.
Right, and
Frodo is by himself a few yards towards the lake.
Yeah.
He's by himself. He is absolutely defenseless. There is nothing he can do to stop the inevitable moment of the ringwraith capturing him and the ring. But then the elves.
And then the elves arrive.
And I'm going to go ahead and let you read that off.
All right. We're not going to read Sam's wonderful elves, sir, but that's what this is responding to.
Yeah.
Yes, it is elves, said Frodo. One can meet them sometimes in the woody end. They don't live in the Shire, but they wander into it in spring and autumn, out of their own lands away beyond the Tower Hills. I am thankful that they do. You did not see, but that black rider stopped just here, and was actually crawling towards us when the song began. As soon as he heard the voices, he slipped away. What about the elves? Said Sam, too excited to trouble about the rider. Can't we go and see them? Listen, they are coming this way, said Frodo. We have only to wait.
I do love Sam's excitement. I understand it. From his perspective, he knows nothing of the Black Rider. He doesn't understand the power of the ring. He doesn't understand that call. That all he knows is that there's this rider in black that may be looking for them. He has no idea how powerful these ringwraiths are.
Right.
So for him, he's just glad that the Black Rider is gone.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that it's elves. I mean, that's what he left home for.
Right. That's exactly why I let me go and see the elves and all, sir.
Yeah.
Hooray.
That was the carrot to get him, to get him out there.
The stick was being turned into a toad or something else unnatural.
Right. Something unnatural.
Yeah.
But yeah, I noticed something about this, because we get the first appearance of the elves is with this song and laughter, these clear voices. And it's that drives the rider away. This is something that I've noticed, and I have not seen anyone comment on this, probably because it doesn't, well, part of it means something, but I don't think it all means something, but it's still cool. But in all three of Tolkien's completed works, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, the elves appear for the first time in the third chapter, and in all three cases, they're immediately preceded by a description of the stars and the sound of their singing.
Oh, well, that part's significant. I don't know about the third chapter part.
The third chapter is the part I'm not sure would be significant, but definitely the stars and the sound of their singing, I think, is significant.
Oh, very.
And so it's worth a little look back at some of this. So, okay, obviously this is the moment in Lord of the Rings. Here's the moment where you hear the singing. Just a few paragraphs ago, we saw the stars were thick in the dim sky, but there was no moon.
Right, and here we get the voices rising up in the starlit air. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. And as we're going to see in the next episode, we're going to meet the elves. We're going to see more descriptions of the stars. And, there's just going to be more of that.
Yeah, we'll get elvish astronomy lessons here in a moment. Yeah.
Right, exactly, yeah. The names of some of your favorite constellations in Elvish.
That's right.
Going back to The Hobbit, Chapter 3, A Short Rest, Bilbo is riding down into Rivendell when he notices the elf smell, one of my favorite moments. And then he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then there came a burst of song like laughter in the trees. And it's the infamous Tra-la-la-lally song.
Yeah. The one I finally come to embrace a little bit, but not much.
I'm glad you have. I'm glad you've come around to it. It's silly. There's no doubt about it.
It is, of course.
But then in the Silmarillion, again, Chapter 3 of the Coming of the Elves and the Captivity of Melkor, and this is Chapter 3 of the Quenta Silmarillion. First of all, Varda creates new stars and brighter to prepare for the coming of the elves, and there's a lovely description of planets and constellations, some of which we will see in the next episode.
Right. That we will.
And then after that, we see Orome riding in the east, where he suddenly stops because it seemed to him that in the quiet of the land under the stars, he heard afar off many voices singing. And that's how he found the elves at Cuivianen.
That is true. Yeah.
So,
my goodness. Each time, stars and singing. I love that.
And we know, the Eldar, the elves are the people of the stars. So that, that makes sense. But the sound of the singing, the stars, it all works together. And again, Chapter 3 is just a neat coincidence, I think. But really the similarity in these moments is fascinating.
I definitely would say that the chapter 3 part is coincidence. I mean, the third chapter of the Silmarillion, I don't even know that he had a chapter structure in mind yet for that.
Exactly. That's true, because that was compiled, after his death. Yeah.
I mean, I know you said finished work, and it really is. At least it's finished, unlike, Gondolin and
right.
some of the other.
But it wasn't finished by him. Yeah, you're right.
No, it really was Christopher that finished that. But, so that part's coincidental. But the idea of the singing and the stars.
And the stars, yeah.
That's really not a surprise. That's exactly how you'd expect them to be seen every time.
Yep.
Music and starlight. That's the elves. Oh, man.
So cool.
And then Frodo explains, because he knew from Bilbo, that they can be found here in the Woody End. He doesn't guess like, oh, I've heard that they sometimes do this. He just knows one can meet them sometime. They don't live here. They wander into it. And interesting, he thinks they're coming into it from their own lands away beyond the Tower Hills.
Right.
We'll get to the fact that he's wrong next week. But I want to drop back to something we looked at way back in episode 35 when we did the Tolkien Reading Day episode on poetry.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I did a survey, you might remember, where I've kind of looked at the poetry of the different races, and men.
Oh, yeah, that was great. I loved that. Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that approach to that. One of the pieces that I read was Elbereth Gilthoniel, which is the Sindarin verse that we'll see when we get to Rivendell in mini meetings early in book 2.
Yeah.
Which should be, what do we think, early September, I suspect.
I think so, yeah.
In preparation for reading that, I recall reading a section from The Road Goes Ever On. That's the musical collaboration that Tolkien did with Donald Swann, where they he put his songs to actual music.
Right.
Now, at the time, I was looking for help with pronunciation and rhythm. I wanted to make sure that I got the poetic feel of that when I was going to read it. But I happened to remember that there was a passage there that directly relates to this one, and it ties back to a particular word in that verse. So I'm going to start there. The word is palandiriel.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
You can kind of tell already where that might be going, palandiriel. Well, in Road, The Road Goes Ever On, Tolkien has this to say. He says, the elves in Rivendell could only be said to gaze afar, that would be towards Elbereth and Valinor, in yearning. But actually, the form used in the hymn is palandiriel, which is the past participle, having gazed afar. This is a reference to the Palantir upon the Tower Hills. The high elves, and this is all Tolkien. I'm reading his passage from The Road Goes Ever On.
From The Road Goes Ever On. Okay.
The high elves, such as did not dwell in or near the havens, journeyed to the Tower Hills at intervals to look afar at Eresia, the Elvish Isle, and the shores of Valinor, close to which it lay. The hymn, which we'll see in many meetings, is one appropriate to elves who have just returned from such a pilgrimage. But wait, there's more. So that's the verse that we get in book 2. I said all that to say this, really. Tolkien says, no doubt Gildor and his companions, which, by the way, we'll find out that this is Gildor and his companions. For those of you who have never read this before, that's these elves.
Right. Yeah.
They appear to have been going eastward. Since they appear to have been going eastward, they were elves living in or near Rivendell, returning from the Palantir of the Tower Hills. On such visits, they were sometimes rewarded by a vision, clear but remote, of Elbereth, as a majestic figure shining white, standing upon the mountain Oyerlose. It was then that she was also addressed by the title Fenuilos, which is translated as Snow White. But I'd say now I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to save the word nerdery on Varda's mini names for next week. But
yes, for sure.
That's how, even Tolkien says these were Rivendell elves returning from a visit to the Tower Hills where they would have looked in the Palantir.
Wow.
And that is really cool.
Wow, that is so cool.
There's so much in just a few paragraphs in that book. Absolutely well worth looking at.
I don't have that book yet, and I really need to get it.
I just wish I had a copy of it with the actual, music.
With the actual music. I have heard the music because a friend of mine. Yeah, a friend of mine has the recording of the music, and so I have heard it. But it's really cool. But
I have an old book. It's the first impression of the book, and so maybe it came with a vinyl LP. It certainly didn't come. I didn't get
some of the early editions did come with a little flexi disc, the one
right.
Yeah.
And that wraps it up for the second part of Three is Company. So join us again next week when we get to hear some first age names.
Yeah, we'll get to hear a little Finrod, a little Elbereth. It's going to be all good.
Yeah.
Before we get to the mailbag, though, we want to take a minute to remind you about the Fellowship of the Podcast over at Patreon. We are almost to our next goal of setting up a Discord server, which is going to give our patrons a chance to listen in live during a recording. Lots of opportunities to laugh at us, folks, not to mention get a sneak peek at an upcoming episode.
Absolutely, and our patrons will certainly enjoy that, so be sure to visit patreon.com/prancingponypod. When you join at the Gift of Gondor level or higher, you're going to get exclusive access to content like short postscripts to each of our chapter-based episodes, along with a full-length bonus episode every quarter.
And if you're looking for a new Tolkien book, please check out the official library pages at our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. We've put together a set of links there for our listeners to all the Tolkien books we've ever mentioned on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get a chance, please post a review on iTunes. This increases our visibility, which means more new listeners, more great questions for Barlowman, more discussion on social media, and a more lively Tolkien community.
Absolutely. And don't forget to share us on social media. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, wherever you hang out and might find Tolkien fans, please tell them about the show. We know they'll enjoy it. Now, one last thing before we move on to Barlowman's Bag. As we've been talking about in our recent episodes, we will soon be coming up on our 11th episode. We plan on celebrating with a party of special magnificence.
And while we'd love to invite all of you, giving presents to all and sundry, we don't even have room for a 100-weight of you. So instead, we came up with a different way for you to participate in our little celebration.
And by participate, we mean make it happen. What we want to do is replay our top moments from the first 100 episodes or so, along with a little director's commentary on those moments. It'll be a lot of fun. But you're going to have to forgive us for not knowing exactly what those top moments are, and that's where you come in.
So we want you to recall your favorite Prancing Pony podcast moments, and then send us an email that includes the following information: the episode number, the start time and the end time of the segment you'd like us to replay, and what you enjoyed about it. Whether it's a serious moment of a discussion or a chat with a guest or just some awful joke, it's all fair game for our levity first.
Awful jokes? We don't have any awful jokes.
Never, never, ever.
So if you wanted the moment we first came up with the idea of GPS voices, now that's a great joke, you would ask for episode 63 at about the 29-minute mark. Now, the truth is that with somewhere around 200 hours of content, there is just no way that we can make the selections ourselves. So we're going to need your help.
That's right. And I don't want to spoil anything, but we might have already received the GPS voices as a
How do you think I knew what the minute mark was?
Right, exactly. Please send us your suggestions. You'll get a shout out if your segment is selected. So get listening. Start sending us those timestamps. Now, you've only got 1 week left until December 9th to get your selections in. That'll give us time to curate the selections, get our commentary ready, and then put all that content together into an episode-length recording before it airs early in the new year.
That's right. Now, please don't delay, folks. This party of special magnificence is only going to work with your help. But this is the last time we'll nag you about it, I promise.
That's right.
Now, with that, it is time to see what old Barlowman has in the mailbag for us. Sean?
All right. Well, first up, we've got a few questions about the Rings of Power from listener and patron Daniel D. in Portland, Oregon. Considering what happened to the men that ended up as the Nazgul, any of the Rings of Power would make one invisible when worn, stretch one's life, turn one into a wraith, and so on. If that is the case with all the Rings of Power, what about the 7 rings of the dwarves? Also, what would happen to a mortal if they were to come to possess one of the 3? They were not made by Sauron, but they are still Rings of Power. And lastly, any thoughts on what could happen to a Vala if they were to slip on the one? It could affect Maiar. Consider Gandalf's statement on what the ring would do to him, and both are Ainur. Or would Gandalf be susceptible only because he's incarnate in a body, rather than wearing it as raiment, as it were? So, Alan, do you want to start us off?
Well, no, not especially. I don't, no. But I'll try. We need to start with what Tolkien said the essential powers of all the rings were. And I'm going to reference letter number 131.
It needs its own intro music. It really
does. It needs a stinger. And I don't have any tattoos, but I think I might get letter 131 tattooed on my arm, like in tiny, tiny print. I'm kidding.
You might be able to fit it on your back in tiny, tiny print.
In very tiny print. It's a big letter, folks.
It is.
Yeah. So anyway, in letter number 131, which will not be tattooed anywhere on my body, I just have to say that, Tolkien explained it to Milton Waldman thusly. The chief power of all the rings alike was the prevention or slowing of decay. In other words, change viewed as a regrettable thing. The preservation of what is desired or loved or its semblance. This is more or less an elvish motive. But also they enhanced the natural powers of a possessor, thus approaching magic, a motive easily corruptible into evil, a lust for domination.
Mm.
And finally, they had other powers, more directly derived from Sauron, such as rendering invisible the material body and making things of the invisible world visible. But the next paragraph adds, the elves of Eregion made 3 supremely beautiful and powerful rings, almost solely of their own imagination, and directed to the preservation of beauty. They did not confer invisibility.
Okay, so we've got some basic rules there. So
Uh-huh.
all the rings slowed decay. And I think we can assume that for the elven rings, which Sauron didn't touch, that manifests as this preservation of beauty.
Yeah.
While for the rings Sauron did have a hand in making, that manifests as something more sinister, the idea of stretching.
Stretching, right. Exactly.
Now, so we've learned that invisibility and I'm just going to call it enwrathening, if I may.
Enwrathening.
We know those are powers that come from Sauron. And
Yeah.
just to be clear, Gandalf tells Frodo later that turning into a wraith actually means crossing over into a wraith world. So that's the invisible world that Tolkien mentions in this letter.
Wow.
So those are both Sauron-derived powers. And so the elven rings are the only rings that did not have those Sauron-derived powers.
Right.
So that means that the dwarven rings should have made their wearers invisible and should have stretched them. But they didn't, and in Appendix A3, Tolkien tells us why that didn't happen to the dwarves. They were made from their beginning of a kind to resist most steadfastly any domination. Though they could be slain or broken, they could not be reduced to shadows, enslaved to another will. And for the same reason, their lives were not affected by any ring, to live either longer or shorter because of it. So, also in that same section, Tolkien says the only power the Seven Rings did have over the dwarves was to inflame their hearts with a greed of gold and precious things, so that if they lacked them, all other good things seemed profitless, and they were filled with wrath and desire for vengeance on all who deprived them.
So it inflamed their greed, and they used that to material benefit. Otrapata, or of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, says that it is said that the foundation of each of the 7 hordes of the dwarf kings of old was a golden ring. So there is that, but it also had a corrupting effect on them so that they cared only about their gold and precious things.
Right.
So it's clear that the difference in effect has to do with the fact that they're dwarves and not a difference in the rings themselves.
Yeah, it's true.
In theory, if a man or a hobbit had gotten a hold of one of the 7 rings, we can assume it would have had a similar effect to what we see from the 9 or even the 1, but on a lesser scale.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And then there's the 3 elven rings. As for those, we know now they did not confer invisibility, even if they were possessed by a mortal. Tolkien was very explicit about that. But if a mortal did wear one, what effect would it have? Well, we have to speculate, but presumably the ring would enhance the natural powers, just like it did for the elves, of even a mortal wearer, specifically with that focus on the preservation of beauty. Now, of course, a mortal's natural powers are going to be a whole lot smaller to begin with than an elf.
Yeah, I suspect Sam could probably do some really sweet gardening back in the Shire if he had
No
Galadriel's
doubt.
ring, but
No doubt.
But he wouldn't be able to turn it into another Lothlorien. He doesn't really start with the same natural powers. Nothing close to Galadriel's natural powers. So he wouldn't be able to achieve something like she did with the same ring.
No.
It would be interesting to speculate what, I don't know, like maybe somebody like Aragorn might have done with an elven ring.
Sure.
As once he's king of Arnor and Gondor, if he also had an elven ring to sort of preserve that realm. But then again, I think he'd also be wise enough not to want to use one.
Yeah,
I mean, he'd know that even for the elves, that desire to arrest change was a kind of temptation. We know that from Letter 208.
And we also know that he's well aware of the history of the Númenóreans and their and they're giving in to temptation in terms of preservation.
Absolutely right. Yep.
Yeah. You'd asked me to think of other mortals and what they might do or try to do with an elven ring. That was one of my jobs this week. But those were the same 2 mortals I happened to think of. So I'm not sure that I can add much more to it. Sam and his mighty gardening. I was thinking of it in conjunction with the gray dust that was in the gift that Galadriel gave him. But even that's finite.
Yeah.
And that's still using her power, not his.
Right. That's
so,
true.
I mean, he might have been able to do some amazing stuff, but there'd still only be the one Malorn. And,
right. Yep. Agree.
Aragorn is the rightful ruler of the kingdom of men, the reunified kingdom, certainly. There would have been a lot more power there, for sure. I mean, he had the power to use the Palantir, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. That's true.
So he definitely would have had some ability to use that. But again, he was wise enough to know better. And the other thing is, you talked about the scale of Sam's natural powers being smaller, and that's true. But I have to say that with him, my concern would be for the continued, and here I'm going to borrow a prefix from you, the embubblement of the Shire. I mean, the
Enwrathening and embubblement.
the enwrathening and the embubblement and the ennoblement and the embiggening.
Yeah.
The Elven rings seem to create this isolated space, right? Almost a time capsule protected from time.
Yeah.
The Hobbits already have that tendency, don't they? That sort of isolationist tendency. Everything is other. They want to keep other out.
Oh, interesting.
So I can see that tendency being a real danger with a ring that's geared for preservation.
That's an interesting thought.
I don't know, maybe Frodo before he'd gone into the West. I think that thought crossed my mind. But the fact is, these Elven rings, their power was preservation, not restoration. So for him, I suspect it was already too late.
Yeah. Some good thoughts there. It's a fun thing to speculate on.
Oh yeah.
Now, as for what would happen to a Vala with the
I don't
One
want to
Ring,
speculate
the last
about
of
that.
Daniel's question. No, I really don't even want to think about that. I mean,
No,
it would not be good.
No, it couldn't be good. I mean, let's get to the Gandalf first, because that's kind of a subset of that question. Being a Maya, I don't think necessarily that he was more susceptible just because he was in a flesh body and because he was incarnate. Sauron, who, let's be clear, he had a physical presence, but it was his raiment, not an incarnation. He wasn't
Right.
like Gandalf in that regard. He was locked into that
Right.
raiment, but it was still raiment. He created the One Ring to externalize his power in the first place. Gandalf feared becoming like the Dark Lord himself, but worse. So even with the desire of strength to do good, as Gandalf said, the ring would have made good detestable and seen evil. Well, actually, that's
Right.
not Gandalf that said that. It's Tolkien that said that. That was a quote from letter 246. But
Right.
knowing how afraid Gandalf was of having that power, now I'm going to translate that to the Valar. It is hard to imagine what would happen if Manwë or Ulmo had it. I mean, good heavens.
It's not something that's going to help you sleep easy at night.
No.
I think the only question is whether, because a Vala starts with greater natural powers than the Maya who created the ring, because since the source of the ring's power was Sauron himself, and if Vala starts with greater powers, does that mean that they would start from a greater position of strength and be able to control it?
Sure.
Somehow, though, I don't think they would. I mean, I kind of feel like, the externalizing of that power kind of means that anybody could tap into that. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the closest, it's scary. It really is scary.
Thinking of one of the Valar with the One Ring.
With the One Ring, with this, this corrupting, tempting.
Yeah, it's a corrupting influence.
Power.
That's the thing. It's not neutral on its own. It is in and of itself evil, and it will influence its bearer to evil eventually.
Right.
Like Bilbo, they would start out good, and they would, take a very long
or
time.
Like
to
Gandalf,
succumb.
They would start out good,
right?
But they would.
There's an inevitability that,
Yeah.
Except for Tulkas. Tulkas rocks. He'd be cool with it.
I mean, the only creature we see who's totally immune to it is like Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, that's who I was thinking. I know. I'm like, well,
well, what is he? But
we know he's not a Vala because all the Valar are identified. Is he an Ainu of some sort? Maybe.
Could be.
I tend towards that conclusion. But we'll see when we get to him.
We'll have lots of time to think about that.
Oh yes, we will.
But as Gandalf says at the Council of Elrond, it's not that Tom has power over the ring; it's that the ring has no power over him.
Right.
Gandalf says such things have no hold on his mind, and it's just because he's just too careless.
Yeah, he's Tom Bombadil, man.
He doesn't care about anything.
He's off to go check out the willow trees and get some lily pads for Goldberry.
Hanging out with Goldberry and stuff. He just doesn't really care about anything. He's got such a small area of concern, just his little patch of his little tract of land. It's not a huge tract of land. No. But the Valar caring for Arda is like all they do, right? I mean, I think their concern
job
for Arda. Yeah. Right, exactly. And I just feel like their concern for Arda and their desire to do good would just make them unbelievably dangerous if they got a hold of the power in the One Ring.
I
it's
agree.
just speculation, but it couldn't be good.
No, it would lead to another Melkor. It would lead to the fall of a Vala. It really would.
I think you're right.
Eventually. It might take an age or two, but it's a very bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Manwë would take longer to fall than, let's say, Ulmo maybe, or
Aule.
Or Tulkas. Aule would probably fall the quickest. Yeah, sadly.
Yeah.
Just because of his
I don't know about Ulmo. I mean, Ulmo's so close to the music.
That's true.
He might be able to hang on.
I guess I was almost thinking of another Maya. I was thinking of Ase, since he rebelled against Ulmo that one time and was going to serve Melkor.
That wouldn't.
Don't
be
let
good.
him get a hold of it for
Ase
sure.
With the ring. No.
Surf's up, man.
I'm starting to hear like a little Dick Dale surf guitar. Like,
well, next we have a quick question from Arthur in Maryland. And thank you, Arthur, for sending in a good question that gets us off of the idea of Dick Dale surf music being played by Ase, who has the one ring.
While Ase destroys the earth.
Exactly. While all the tides rise and there's like 60-foot swells and bad ideas. So now you've gotten us away from that distraction. Question's a good one. He says, a thought on re-listening to Shadow of the Past. Why does Gandalf refer to you-know-who as Sauron the Great rather than Sauron the Enemy, Sauron the Abhorred, or Sauron the Weasel?
Nice.
It does seem odd for Gandalf. I mean, he's one of the good guys to refer to Sauron as the Great, especially when the Weasel is an option, apparently. Any thoughts on that one, Sean?
Oh, well. I mean, considering Sauron prefers to be called King Excellent, Sauron the Great doesn't seem that much like sucking up. But
no.
But no, it is odd. I mean, I did a little search in my ebook, and I found Sauron the Great appears 4 other times in Lord of the Rings that I can find.
Oh, okay.
Twice in the dialogue of the Mouth of Sauron. Well, okay, that's no surprise. Once in the words of another messenger of Sauron, and that's in Glóin's account to the Council of Elrond.
Oh, yeah.
And then once in Appendix A1, which is actually the narrator speaking, but sort of from Ar-Pharazôn's perspective before he assaults Sauron and imprisons him and brings him back to Númenor.
Okay.
So it does seem limited to Sauron's followers, with the exception of Ar-Pharazôn, although that's probably just a mark of professional courtesy. I mean, he was a big fan of Sauron's work.
Well, that's true.
But,
big fan.
Yeah. Hey, big fan. Can you sign this, please? But the only thing I can imagine is that this is some kind of official style or official title.
Yeah.
And Gandalf is just using it this one time, so it has the right, historical context, I guess you'd say it.
Sure.
Surely not everyone throughout history who's been called the Great was really great in a good way, right?
Exactly. And that's what I was looking at. I kind of dug in. This isn't great as an upgrade from good. This is great, meaning, and I looked this up, this isn't like my own definition, remarkable in magnitude, degree, or effectiveness.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
I dug this up online, and it turns out that somewhere near 120 monarchs at some point or another were called the Great. I'm pretty sure most of them, or at least many of them, were not great in the good way, though. So I think that's the tendency we're using here. Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me, and especially since Arthur said, who, that reminds me of the words of Ollivander, the wand maker in the Harry Potter series. He's talking about Lord Voldemort, and he says, he did great things. Terrible, yes, but great.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the idea here. Yeah.
Great in the sense
in
that
magnitude,
they are
in size,
magnitude and scope,
in intensity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, folks, on that note, it wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Now, please be sure to join us again next week when we have a talk with Noldoran Exiles in the last part of Three's Company.
Thanks again for listening, and thank you for making our common room on Facebook such a fun place to spend time. We want all of you to be a part of this conversation, and it does not stop when the episode ends. So see the comments, questions, corrections, and more on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast, on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and on Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod.
And a very special thank you to our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier: DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, and Chad in Texas. Thank you so much.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, please don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your favorite walking song to Barnum at theprancingponypodcast.com. We'll try to get him into our next show. Well, however long we've had, is still far too short a time to spend amongst such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.